generations as leaders, gentlemen of the Jewish community, and this is one of the articles called Jews in Panama, and his great niece just essentially led the discussion at one of the family homes relative to her great uncle and that. So these are, again, this is some we're going to be reading coming up by Leo Spitzer. I never knew that Jews during the Holocaust found refuge in Bolivia. And they were, again, an effort to bring Jews there. And the reason why it's called Hotel Bolivia, because it was just not, people could not survive there. It was not a climate that was conducive to Jewish life. So most people were there and after the war left. And it was segregated between the Polish and Eastern European Jews and the German and the Viennese Jews, and they didn't mix. And so again, there's a culture of memory of a refugee from Nazism. And I saw this staring at the Kol Sharit Israel library, and I picked it up, and it was a fascinating book. And then this is another book we're going to be reading. Again, it's The Cross and the Pear Tree by Victor Pereira, and talking about his family roots in Jerusalem, and then going all over the world relative to finding the family history and branches of their families that are both Jewish and non-Jewish, which is a lot of the stories here in Panama as well. So, and this one, for those of you Eastern European Jews, if you want to have a treat, is a guy called Yiddish South of the Border. And it's about the anthology of Latin American Yiddish writing, primarily in Argentina, because the largest Jewish community in South America is in Argentina. And so you had dozens of Yiddish press, Yiddish theater, and it really was a replication of what Jewish life was in Eastern Europe. So this is again a collection by Alan Astor, who's a scholar, and again an introduction by Stavins. And this is one of the best books on Sephardi, and this is the Fidanki family's tree, Sephardim in Americas. And what we do is it's such a thick book, we read stories, and we do that. And then this is another one, the Jews in Spain, that we'll be reading. So I just wanted to go over those to give you a sense of what we've been doing there. How my time? My time's up, more or less.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I just quickly wanted to go over with you, I think I gave you enough about the Inquisition. Just a couple of tidbits, and then we'll go on to Yaakov, and maybe we'll have some extra time. Again, so the Jews settled in Panama City, and Panama City was supposedly founded by a converso conquistador named Pedrarias de Avila. Okay, so whether that's true or not, I do not know. But a Sebastian Rodriguez, who decided to establish a secret synagogue in the city of Panama, now known as Panama Viejo, was arrested and condemned by the Inquisition of Cartagena in 1643. In 1602, the governor of Veraguas, which then included Panama, a Portuguese converso named Juan Lopez de Sequeira, founded the city of David. He was suspected of naming it for King David rather than a saint, the accepted custom in the colonies, owing supposedly to his Jewish origin. Does anybody know that? I never read, right? But I read that, okay? So again, let me just go through some of the quick things of contemporary Jewish history here, and then Yaakov will continue. So again, the first real contemporary Jewish presence in modern Panama was by an August Salomon from the islands of Guadalupe, who together with a Baron de Fiori obtained in 1835 a concession to construct an interoceanic canal and transisthmian railroad, but they failed to get the financing for that. And again, it's recorded in 1853 that those traveling the isthmus, they get from the Atlantic to Panama to the Pacific, used overhaul transportation services provided by the company recorded as Plize and Enriquez, Jews from Guadalupe and Jamaica. With the 1867 disastrous year in St. Thomas because of severe hurricane, tidal wave, cholera, sent a wave of Jewish immigration to Panama, again, and that was in 1867. 1852, in Panama, the Hebrew Benevolent Society was formed, and in 1876, under the leadership of Elias Nunez Martinez, the Kol Sharit Israel Burial and Charitable Society was incorporated as the synagogue. So in 1876, the first synagogue in Panama was established, and it was an Orthodox synagogue at that time. And in about 1890 in Cologne, a second congregation called, again, Kahal Kadosh Yaakov, the Holy Congregation of Jacob. And then again, a number of the Osario families in the Cologne area were part of it, and that folded after a couple of years. In 1929, KSI transitioned from an Orthodox to a Reform congregation, mainly because of the influence of a number of rabbis who were then called to serve the American troops that were in the canal, and that the congregation itself had really been an informal organization where the members of the families conducted the services and the women of the sisterhood gave the Hebrew school. And it really became a time where they were getting disconnected from mainstream Judaism and sought help, and those who were available in Panama were the Reform rabbis. And they brought some consistency of Judaism back to the congregation, and that's when that's acceptable to say, isn't it, Roberto? Yeah, thank you. So in any case, that's part of what, right, Ernesto? So that's part of what happened there, okay? And now it's led by Rabbi Gustavo Krasalnik. He's been there for 14 years now. He received his ordination of smicha from the Conservative Rabbinical Seminary in Argentina, and we regard ourselves as the liberal congregation, which means we're the only congregation in Panama to provide for conversions, and the conversions are done before a conservative bet din. And so we're an amalgam between parts Reform and parts conservative. Is that okay, Patricia? More or less, right? So it's a big tent Judaism, and it's a very welcoming congregation, and I'm very proud to be of it, and Rabbi Krasalnik sends his regards. So the first Panamanian rabbi to be ordained was Dennis Sasso, and he graduated in 1974 from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and he is now in Indianapolis at the largest Reconstructionist congregation in the country. The second is David Cohen Enriquez, who was ordained in 2009 at the Rabbinical School of Hebrew College in Boston, and is now a rabbi at the Conservative Synagogue Temple Sinai in Marblehead, Massachusetts. Bethel, of which my dear colleague is a member of and a practitioner, is originally organized as a conservative congregation, and it was in the 1930s by those who came, Eastern European Jews who came in from the Holocaust. And they transitioned into a Chabad congregation, and it's led by Rabbi Ari Lane, who came to Panama in 1994, right? More or less. So, and the third congregation is Shevet Achim, which is Eastern Sephardi Orthodox, and his arrival was Rabbi Zion Levi in 1951, and he created the substance of that congregation, which is now the largest synagogue in Panama, with a number of subsidiary synagogues as well. Quickly, Henry Brandon founded the Panama Fire Department. Herbert de Castro founded the Panama Philharmonic Orchestra. Edward Maduro Lindo wrote the words of the Patriotic March of Panama. Ada de Castro, known as the Angel of Palo Seco, along with her husband, Dr. Ezra Gurwitz, organized a leper colony hospital in Palo Seco. Emily de Castro founded the Salvation Army Braille Teaching Center in Panama City. And Joshua Lindo, who was then had offices in New York City, worked with Manuel Amador Guerrero, who worked for having succession of Panama from Spain. And he eventually, Guerrero became the president of Panama from 1904 to 1908. Max Shalom de Valle served as Panama's vice president from 1964-69, and briefly, from April the 8th to April 15th, 1967, was president in the absence of the president. So he was the first Jewish president of Panama. We've had two. And he, in history, is the first president of Latin America to be Jewish. And his nephew, Eric Arturo, was a president as well. And currently the past president of our congregation, Milton Enriquez, serves as the minister of the office of the president. Right now, the Laura Flores, who is a member of the congregation, is the Panama ambassador to the United Nations. And just in closing, the projection is somewhere between 10 and 12,000 Jews in Panama. That's about all we know. I could go in further. I didn't cover the other business community, but I think I've said enough. I think we better raise the air conditioning. And questions later?
We'll have questions and answers.
Okay.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to welcome Jacob Yakow Poliwoda, who was born in Venezuela. He's a cum laude engineering graduate of the Simon Bolivar University in Caracas. He's also an accomplished violinist. He currently teaches middle school math and Judaic studies at Magen David Academy in Panama City while studying to become a rabbi. He speaks Spanish, English, Portuguese, Hebrew, and Yiddish. He and his wife Hannah of Sao Paulo, Brazil, live in Panama City. Yakow is going to entertain us with some stories and a short medley of Jewish music for violin.
It's a pleasure to be here. Usually my classes in school, you can imagine middle school, it's not exactly as quiet as this. So it is a pleasure to have an audience that is willing to listen and I don't have to scream over the voices. Well, a lot of history has been said and I do not want to continue. I would like to project maybe a little bit towards the future. But since we are Jewish and we are deeply rooted in history, so I don't have an option. I will have to say something that will connect us to the past, and hopefully with that, we'll be able to connect forward. This is a very special year, and I spoke to Barbara a few times about this concept. We call it, I think we came to an agreement, we've called it the mysterious hand. And the mysterious hand somehow makes everything work together and somehow puts the pieces in place. This is a special year. Historically, if we go back to the times of the temple, the Jews had a certain law that was to meet and gather every 7 years. It was called the Hakhel year. That's the name it had. And basically it consisted of getting together. To do what? To get together. In the process, the king would come out and he would read the Torah for everybody. But initially, it was the concept of meeting. And actually the word Hakhel means that, gathering. The point is obvious. You have Jews living all over the place. Okay, Israel, it is a small country, but the Jews lived in different places. And every 7 years they would come together in the temple in Jerusalem and share again that common purpose, that common vision, with the reading of the Torah, of course, that helped them reinvigorate that and establish it for the future 7 years. And I don't think what we're doing now is anything less. We are exactly doing that. And in fact, this year, if we would still be counting the regular years of Hakhel, the 7-year cycle, this would be a year of Hakhel. So you will find in different communities around the world that they search to get together, and definitely Boquete, by that mysterious hand, was not left out. And Baruch Hashem, we can say, well, we are meeting and we are doing a small Hakhel in this part of the planet. Having said that, I would like to pick on a Jewish custom or style, which is to share a story with you, and hopefully that story will help bring out that connection that we have between each other and project to the future, like I said before. And I will go back to the temple times again, briefly. It is said 300 years ago there was a famous man, a saintly man, in fact, his name was Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov. Okay, everybody knows him in short as the Baal Shem Tov. And he was the leader of the Hasidic movement. And this man, before he was famous at all, he would just go from town to town, meeting different people, sharing a story, sharing a nice word, uplifting the people, and that's it. That was his job in the beginning. In fact, he would attend to small children in a school. So, in one of those tours, he happened to come to a town where there was a particular Jew. His name was Leib, okay, and this man was a water carrier. Now, as a water carrier, you don't make much of a living. However, this particular man had 4 very good clients. They were well-to-do, and they would pay him a little extra for every barrel of water he would bring. It happened to be that as he was walking, doing his chores, he happens to see a group of people meeting on the side of the street. And he is fascinated, of course. It's not regular or common. He comes up to them, and he sees there's a man telling a story, and it was the Baal Shem Tov. Of course, nobody knew who he was. So he hears to the story, and the Baal Shem Tov is saying a story from the times of the temple. There used to be a man, a very rich man, that was going up to Jerusalem, and he was bringing a very fat ox as an offering. And in the process, the ox decided to stop. And it doesn't matter what he tried or whoever tried, the ox wouldn't budge. Suddenly there was a man that was walking by, and he wasn't so well off, and he was carrying a bundle of greens in his hand, some vegetables to take to his home, to his family. And he sees the situation, and he comes up and offers the ox his greens. So of course the ox nibbles a bit, and he pulls back the greens, and the ox takes a step forward. And then he keeps stepping back, and the ox keeps following him until he finishes all the greens he had in his hand, and they arrive to the temple. The man went home with nothing in his hand, but he did what he did, and the rich man was, of course, very happy. He offered the offering, and it was given around to the Kohanim, and he also partook of it, and some of it was offered in the Mizbeach, in the altar. And that night, the rich man has a dream. And in the dream, he is told the following: your offering was very pleasant, but the offering of the poor man was much more pleasant. So the Baal Shem Tov is telling this story to the people in the town, and this water carrier, Leib, is listening, and he says to himself, that's marvelous. What could I do? And Baal Shem Tov says, doing something with sacrifice and sincerity is worth much more than all the oxes in the world. And the man really took it to heart. He was a simple man, he said. And he thought to himself, as he was working and finishing his day, he was thinking to himself, what can I do with sincerity and with sacrifice? Before getting to his home, the idea pops in his head, and he is very excited. And there was a Jew who was his competition, and the Jew was in charge of giving water to the shuls, to the synagogues, so that the worshippers could come and wash their hands and whatever. You need water everywhere. So he thought to himself, well, this Jew is not well off. I'm a little bit in a better situation than him. And I would really like to have the honor or the privilege of serving the synagogues. Now, the synagogues, they pay half the price of a barrel of water. However, I have 4 very good customers, and I can exchange them with this man, with my friend. So he'll have a better living, and I'll have the honor of serving the synagogues. That was his plan. He comes home, he tells his wife, he's all excited, and his wife was also very excited. And they made a decision, you know what, let's do it. They called their colleague, And they tell him, this is what we want to do. The man, of course, accepted right away because he really needed it. And from that day on, this man started serving the synagogue. Now it is said that the story, that's the end of the story. It is said that this couple was married for a long time and didn't have any children. And in the merit of that sacrifice, they had two very, very special children. They were later Hasidic masters of their own. And this is the story. Why do I say the story? Because every one of us, I'm sure, knows what they can do with sacrifice and sincerity. And I'm sure there's always something we can add to that. There's a lot of projects going on, and I know Barbara has a lot of things for the Jewish community here, and hopefully those big things will happen. God willing, it should be so. For my part, what I would like to share with you, and at least leave you with a message, and hopefully take this baggage of Jewish history and that we have on us to something practical and concrete. And that is a small action. Just a small act with sincerity and sacrifice is worth everything in the world. Outside you will see I put some things, I know they are a little intimidating, but my intention is not to intimidate. On the contrary, my intention is to offer the possibility for all of us to engage in activities, acts of good deed, that only allow us to become better people, connect to God, as these are His mitzvot, His commandments, and this is the way He gave us to connect to His infiniteness, us finite beings. So outside you will see there are some Shabbat candles. It's not very hard to light Shabbat candles. Every Friday evening you can take a minute. I am giving you there a couple of candles for yourself and the blessing. You can check the times on the web. There's also a very special mitzvah, which is tzedakah. Tzedakah is giving a coin to a pushka, okay, to a Jewish cause. It doesn't have to be $1,000. It could just be a cent. That already is a mitzvah. That already is a good deed, and it could be done with sacrifice and sincerity. And that's, I think, worth more than anything. I will share with you now a few notes in the violin, and we'll move on with the program.